go. First live mock draft of the offseason. Welcome into Fantasy Baseball today on Wednesday, February 26th. I am Frank Stampfl, joined by Scott White and Chris Towers. Today on the show, live 12-team head-to-head points mock draft. We have done lots of mock drafts this offseason. This is the first one we are doing here on the podcast, here on YouTube. Thanks for everyone for hanging out. Are you guys ready to draft?
So ready. Beyond ready. I've been ready for 5 minutes because that's the time we said the draft was going to start.
Chris, ready to go?
I'm ready.
Let's go. Chris is drafting second in this draft, by the way. I am drafting 8th. Scott is drafting 12th overall. And yesterday on our head-to-head strategy podcast, we went over the CBS point scoring format, so I'm not going to do that again. But the lineups, in case you want to know, are a little bit shallower than the Roto format. 1 of each infield position, 3 outfielders, 1 utility, and then 5 starting pitchers, 2 relievers, and 5 bench spots. I think with that, Scott, we are ready to go. I will pull up the draft board for those watching on YouTube. You can follow along. I will put this little tab by round so you can see who is being drafted. Switch it on over to my rankings, which I updated today. Make sure I got everything in order. Sure, there's still going to be things that pop up along the way, but here we are. We're off and running. First overall, no surprise in a head-to-head points league, Aaron Judge with the top pick.
Is that our top player in this format across the board?
I believe that
is for me. Yep.
That would make sense. I will pull up the rankings just to be sure of that, but yes, I do think so.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be honest. I'd rather pick third than second, I think.
I did that to torture you, Chris.
Because I
wanted to see if you'd take Shohei Ohtani.
Ohtani is my number 2 player in this format.
You don't really want to do it.
But
you don't really want to.
Well, I just have my concerns about making the number 2 pick a guy coming back from shoulder surgery. And I did it. It's fine. I'll live with it. But yeah, it's not the favorite-ist pick that I've ever made. On the other hand, I can't complain too much about a guy who had 600 top 700. He had almost 800 points.
He averaged 5 points per game. I'll tell you that much. And Judge was the second highest at 4.65. So
yeah,
I don't think Ohtani's going to average 5 again, but yeah, I mean, obviously, if not for the shoulder concern there, I think he'd be my number 1, even in this format.
Yes. I do think it's defensible to take Bobby Witt second if you just wanted to play it safe. I mean, Bobby Witt was still over 4 fantasy points per game last year, and he went third overall, by the way. It was Judge, Ohtani, Bobby Witt to start. No surprises there. And then Juan Soto, 4th overall, I think sees a little bit of a boost here in the head-to-head points format, followed by Jose Ramirez, Mookie Betts, Ellie De La Cruz, and I am on the clock. So, Scott, you can talk while I make
Yeah, we're moving pretty fast here. Everybody was geared up for round 1. I think it's followed my rankings almost exactly so far. Judge, Ohtani, Witt, Soto, Jose Ramirez, Mookie Betts. He is better in this format, I would say, because you don't worry about maybe the potential fluctuation in batting average, and his strikeout rate is always low, which helps. But I don't think I have him as high as 6th. Ellie De La Cruz 7th. I know we all have him as a second rounder in this format. Not that it's insane to draft him in round 1.
He was I think 550 points is kind of the first round bar, and he cleared it. It was 556 last year.
It's just for him, if other players who are still available meet their baseline, they'll probably outperform De La Cruz. If De La Cruz takes a step forward, though, he might be a top 5 player regardless of format.
Yeah, just for some context, Kyle Tucker and Mookie Betts were both on basically a 600 point pace. And Tucker, that was a new level for him, so we don't know exactly whether that's sustainable, but that's the context, right? Ellie was 556. The other guys are more like 600 if everything goes right. Ellie has that upside. I think it's less likely.
Yeah, and in this format, losing points for strikeouts, obviously, Ellie De La Cruz over 31% strikeout rate last year. I wound up taking Kyle Tucker. Tucker versus Gunnar, I think that's a pretty close call. first year in Chicago. Will he be as good as he was last year? Maybe it takes a little bit of a step back, but it's also a contract year. I wound up going with Kyle Tucker, followed by Yordan Alvarez, Gunnar Henderson, Tarek Skubal, and Scott, you are up for 2.
Yeah, it's nice that the first pitcher, even in this format, doesn't go till pick 11, Tarek Skubal. And I think at the higher end of the pitching ranks is where roto leagues outpace points leagues, because normally the higher end pitchers, you're seeing superior ratios, you're seeing bigger strikeout numbers. Those stats don't matter as much in points leagues as they do in roto. You want depth in this format. You want pitching depth. And so it's more the mid-range of starting pitcher where we might see, at least we should see in theory, maybe the prices go up a bit for pitchers.
Yeah, I would think you probably get a similar number of pitchers taken in a head-to-head points league, even though the player pool is a little bit smaller. So that just because ideally, I think you want more pitchers on your bench in a head-to-head points league than necessarily in a roto league.
So I took Corbin Carroll here with pick 12. He averaged 4.07 points per game from June 6th on when he turned his season around, which is certainly elite production. And so I'm hoping that's more the player he is season round. We saw that more in his rookie season, of course. And I'm going to pair him with Vladimir Guerrero here just because I haven't had a chance to do it yet. Guerrero obviously had the second best year of his career, 3.57 points per game. Next in my rankings was Francisco Lindor, who was last year in a pretty typical Lindor season, 3.72. So he actually was better than Guerrero on a per game basis, with Guerrero having performing closer probably to his maximum extent. But I've talked before about how first base is maybe the one position where I do feel a little bit of urgency. And I haven't had a chance to get Guerrero yet, so I just want to see how it goes. Maybe I'll be regretting it when Vinny Pasquantino's out there in round 8. I don't know.
Yeah, we are into the second round. Scott led it off with Vlad Jr., as he just said, followed by Paul Skeens. Want to come back to this team later and see how it turns out, because Beat On from Razzball started pocket aces, Tarek Skubal and Paul Skeens. Will he get enough offense? That is the question. Next up was Freddie Freeman, 15th overall, and I am on deck here. Got a few names that I am looking at, and I thought about taking Gunnar Henderson over Kyle Tucker just because I didn't want to fill up my outfield spots too early by taking Tucker, and then if the best player in round 2 is also an outfielder, that would have messed things up. But that's not the case, because Zach Wheeler goes with the next pick, and I am up. I will take Francisco Lindor. That worked out pretty well. Start with Kyle Tucker and Lindor here. And those are my first 2 picks. Feel pretty good about that.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I thought Lindor was the next best hitter, so I'm on board with you there. The Freddie Freeman pick is a little surprising to me, him going 15th overall. This is a format where he can be as good as he is in Roto. He can be even better in this format because he still gets points for the doubles. And
I think he was the number 2 hitter in 2023, wasn't he?
That sounds right. Yeah, in 2023. Obviously, 2024 was a down year for Freddie Freeman, and he's getting older, so it may just be the norm. But 3.28 is what he averaged. So if he does that again, if he just repeats his 2024, it'll be kind of an underwhelming choice there at 15th overall. But certainly he has the upside to perform up to it.
But just for some context, Fernando Tatis, I think, was at 3.15. Acuna was right around there last year. Obviously, that was a down year for him. Harper probably wasn't much better because he didn't get to 500 points last year.
3.31. Yeah, it was pretty close between him and Freeman. Also a down year for Harper.
I would guess Marte was ahead of those guys. I would guess Jarren Duran was ahead of those guys.
Marte was significantly. Duran was also. Yeah, 3.68 for Marte, 3.48 for Duran. I don't know if we're citing those numbers too much. It's like number overload, but hopefully that helps to contextualize things.
After Francisco Lindor, Julio Rodriguez, Rafael Devers, Fernando Tatis, Logan Gilbert, Bryce Harper. Chris, you are up. Do just want to quickly mention some of these picks. Rafael Devers, I think we normally see go at the 2-3 turn, maybe third round pick, has not appeared in spring games yet. Still working his way back from those shoulder injuries from last season, but sounds like he will be playing in games as soon as next week. I think.
Has his ADP dropped at all? I mean, obviously he didn't fall in this draft going 19th, but Has it? I know you looked at that recently, Chris. Devers.
I don't think his price has dropped. I did drop him a little bit. I dropped him basically to the bottom of that tier at third base with Manny Machado, Austin Riley, Jazz Chisholm. But, if he gets into games and has no limitations, he may rise back up. It's a little concerning that he didn't have structural damage, didn't have surgery, and wasn't 100% by the start of spring training, right? Like that.
And it was clearly impeding his performance the last 2 months. So, yeah, I'm just kind of surprised there hasn't been more of a pushback to it. And I don't know that this is his best format anyway. That like most of the third base crop suffers in this format. Jose Ramirez doesn't, but Devers does, Riley does, Jazz Chisholm does. Yeah.
To answer your question, Scott, the last 2 weeks over at the NFBC, looking at just 12-team leagues, Rafael Devers' ADP is 32.9. So that does feel like maybe he has been slipping down a little bit into the middle of the third round.
Is he below Riley now?
He is below Riley, but still ahead of Machado.
Okay.
So, after Devers went, mentioned Tatis, Logan Gilbert, Bryce Harper, Chris took Ketel Marte. Then there was Trey Turner. That finishes out round 2. And then to kick off round 3, we have Austin Riley, Corbin Burns, and Ronald Acuna. So, Chris, you did jump in with a starting pitcher there. Let's take a quick break. When we return, we'll get your thoughts on that pick. Catch everyone up on round 3 right after this.
Who's in? Who's out? Let the madness begin. The NCAA Men's Basketball Championship Selection Show on CBS and streaming on Paramount+.
Welcome back in. We are in round 3 of our 12-team head-to-head points mock draft. We are doing it live here on YouTube. Thanks, everyone, for hanging out. Make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And latest pick, Jarren Duran went at 28th overall, just after Ronald Acuna. Chris, through 3 picks, you have Ohtani, Ketel Marte, and Corbin Burns. How do you like it?
I think it's fine. It's not like the sexiest group of players ever outside of Shohei Ohtani, but I think it's Ketel Marte excels in this format when he's healthy. There's just some risk between Ohtani, Marte, and Burns, but at least in this format, reports of Burns' demise have been greatly exaggerated, I think. He was still a 521 point player last season. His career high is 560. He's been a little bit worse, but I'm optimistic that strikeouts will tick back up. And I'm fine with Corbin Burns there.
Had a pretty shocking pick here a minute ago, Frank.
Yes, that was my reaction. Cody Bellinger, 31st overall. A couple other picks after Duran, Jackson Chourio, Corey Seager, then Bellinger, and I went ahead and took Manny Machado. So, I mean, maybe if this was coming off Cody Bellinger's MVP season a couple of years ago, I mean, third round, that is far and away the highest that we've seen and something we would not recommend doing. But
I mean, there's a chance he lives up to it, even though last year was disappointing relative to 2023 because his strikeout rate is so low. He averaged an even 3 points per game, which is similar to Jose Altuve, for instance. And that was in what we think, given Cody Bellinger's new environment, Yankee Stadium, short porch, all of that, we think 2024 is worse than what he's going to be this year. It's just, I don't know that anybody else was thinking about taking Cody Bellinger even in the next 3 rounds.
Yeah, I mean, that's what you do have to battle at times, is being higher on a player and wanting to get that player on your team. So being aggressive and knowing when to take them. But if Bellinger's ADP is around 100, you still could have taken him in round 6. I mean, 5 if you really want to be aggressive. So yeah, round 3 I think is really pushing it. I was debating Manny Machado or Jackson Merrill at my pick, but again, something we talk about with the 3 outfielders in this format. I don't want to fill up my outfield spots too fast. I do have Jackson Merrill 1 spot ahead of Machado, but I think there is a drop off at third base, and I think they're close enough. So I wound up going with Machado, and so far I have Machado, Lindor, and Kyle Tucker. I feel really good about that start. And after I took him, there was Matt Olson, Jackson Merrill, Pete Alonso.
Yeah, I mean, Bellinger going ahead of Olson and Alonso. That's hard to justify, but
but Scott, anyway. You were up at the 3-4 turn. Your first 2 picks were Vlad and
Corbin Carroll was the first pick. Yeah. I think it's a gimme here. I love when this happens. The top 2 players on my draft board they're each the last remaining player in their tier, and both at positions I need.
Like that.
One is Jazz Chisholm, who, isn't as good in a points league because he tends to strike out a lot. But after joining the Yankees, 3.58 points per game. I'll take that in round 3. He'll probably be closer to like 3.25, 3.3, but still, it's fine here. He's got the dual eligible. He may be triple eligible. It seems like picking up second base too, so that'll be useful. All 3 of those positions I need: outfield, third base, and second. So Jazz Chisholm is who I'm taking with the 36th overall pick. And 37th, I've said it before on the podcast, if William Contreras is there in round 4, I'm probably going to take him. He's there with the first pick in round 4. So I'm taking him. And I prefer it to take elite catchers. Like, if there's any format where I'm going to take an elite catcher, it's this one, because you have only those 9 hitter spots to work with. I want impact from every single one.
Yep. I think that makes sense. We are here into the 4th round, and just to give people some context on William Contreras, he scored 495 fantasy points last season. The next closest catcher was Salvador Perez at 421. So nearly a 75-point difference between the two. Yes, you definitely do separate yourself with the number 1 catcher in fantasy. And then the next pick, James Wood, Jose Altuve. I am on deck. We will see what happens here. Have an idea of what I want to do. James Wood, hoping to get back into game action by Thursday of this week. He's dealing with left quad tendonitis. Just went 38th overall, which is probably a little bit aggressive. Format.
Yeah, particularly this format. It's certainly he has the upside to live up to it, but
the one thing about James Wood is for all the talk about how many strikeouts they're going to be, and yes, he was on close to a 200 strikeout pace, which is a detriment in this league. He should be a pretty good on base source, and he did walk 39 times in 79 games last year. That comes out to about an 80 walk pace over a full season. So, the nice thing about James Wood's rookie season is it was 79 games, so you can just double everything for a full season pace. It makes it sound like you're good at math. So,
but what it actually came out to, James Wood's production as a rookie, 2.82 points per game. So I'm going to guess he's the first hitter taken who averaged less than 3 points per game. No, actually, Pete Alonso did last year in a down year, less than 3.
But Alonso has, that 130 RBI upside.
Sure.
This line.
Yeah. We expect Alonso to outperform what he did last year, and Wood could take a step forward in year 2. I think it's more likely than not he does.
Mm-hmm.
But it will take him improving in some areas, particularly the angle the ball takes off his bat.
After Jose Altuve went, we saw Cole Reagans go 40th overall. I took Kyle Schwarber at 41, then Garrett Cole and George Kirby. So some starting pitchers starting to go off the board here in round 4. Kyle Schwarber, I've mentioned this before. I like getting one of the utility-only bats if I can, usually it's after pick 50, like in the 5th round. But in a points league, Kyle Schwarber excels in this format. 3.4 fantasy points per game last year. Great on-base percentage. Sounds like he could hit in the middle of the lineup, maybe clean up the season for the Phillies, but I just think that'll wind up being more RBI instead of maybe runs scored for Schwarber. But
it also might not be a permanent arrangement. They've obviously had good success with Schwarber in the leadoff spot. It's kind of surprising they're changing it, but they could very quickly change back.
Yep. Are you guys good with Kyle Schwarber in round 4 of a points league?
Yeah. I prefer him to James Wood and obviously Cody Bellinger. So several of the players who went before him.
I will just say I think you can make a case for Brent Rooker ahead of him. He obviously doesn't have as long of a track record, but the per game production was very, very similar. Rooker might have actually been a little bit ahead of him in this format. And obviously we think Rooker has a better chance of getting outfield eligibility earlier, although with JT Realmuto expected to get more time at DH this year, Schwarber should be outfield eligible at some point.
Yeah, they were both right at 3.4 fantasy points per game last year, Rooker and Schwarber. And Yeah, I just think the track record, I'll probably lean towards Schwarber. And
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Like I think Rooker is probably mostly who he showed he was last year, but I do expect a little bit of a step back.
We just got a gasp, and a mustache.
I'm not happy with where
Chris.
I am right now.
There's a bit of a pitcher run right now. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pitchers in a row. Garrett Cole, George Kirby, Chris Sale, Logan Webb, Framber Valdez, and then Chris, you took Dylan Cease, perhaps to your dismay.
It's not so much Dylan Cease. Dylan Cease is fine. He never misses a start. He hasn't missed a start since like the minors. If anything, he doesn't really go deep into games because he's super inefficient, but he throws a lot of innings and gets a lot of strikeouts, and he's fine in a vacuum. This price is fine for him. It's just that I'm kind of boxed out of the best hitters available right now.
Oh, I see why.
Because my top 2 hitters left are Marcell Ozuna and Brent Rooker. And I thought about just saying, screw it. Let's take Brent Rooker. But what if he doesn't get you outfield eligibility until May?
No, you couldn't do it, Chris.
I can't. But then like the next best hitter was Ozzy Albies, who I believe just went, and he's second base. I already have Ketel Marte.
Yep.
And Marcus Semien is one of my top remaining hitters. So I mean,
this is the danger, I guess, for
the
people
way this has gone. Yeah.
Drafting Ohtani in the first round. I mean, this is the danger of things that could happen when.
Do you wish you'd taken Bobby Witt instead of Ohtani with the second pick?
The way it worked out, I probably would feel better with, Bobby Witt and Brent Rooker instead of Ohtani and Wyatt Langford, which is who I ended up taking with my 5th pick. We're taking Wyatt Langford too high, but this is like 8 picks later than his NFBC ADP in February. So it's fine. I'll take the chance on the upside there. But yeah, I don't love the start here. I'm going to be honest.
Yeah, let's catch us up on the picks, Frank.
Yeah, so after Framber Valdez, Chris took Dylan Cease, and then the end of round 4 was Ozzy Albies. The start of round 5, Garrett Crochet, Wyatt Langford went to Chris, and then Marcus Semien.
It is, I would say, Wyatt Langford making it to 50 in this draft. Oh, that's a reaction to him having a little bit of an oblique thing early on. It sounds like it's not a big deal, but that's why he round to 50 fell to pick 50. But this is one of the few mock drafts we've done this preseason without Doc Eisenhower. And he tried to get in at the last minute. I'm like, oh, sorry, we're full. I was kind of glad we could do one without him to see where Langford legitimately goes, because he never lets Langford get past him in round 3.
And in theory, Langford should be good in this format. Obviously, last year he just wasn't all that good in general, but his plate discipline should be pretty good. He should walk 60 times. He won't strike out 150 times. I've been sort of like grappling with Wyatt Langford and the rookie season he had and what it means for him, and trying to find some comps for him, because he is treated like he has gigantic upside. And we saw a glimpse of it in September. He had a very good September. He was the AL player of the month, I believe, in the month of September. But when you look into the data, there aren't any like super standout skills. Wyatt Langford looks more at this point like a guy without any obvious weaknesses. And that can be its own version of a superpower. Like Francisco Lindor is another guy where it's just, he's not necessarily like exemplary at any one skill as a hitter, but there's just nothing he doesn't do well. And that could be what a Wyatt Langford turns into.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's too early to tell. If you just look at his September data, you'll come away with a different impression. I did want to say, because you mentioned this might be a good format for Langford. Believe it or not, this is one of the more shocking stats. As underwhelming as Langford's rookie season was compared to the Jacksons, Churio, and Merrill, he averaged the most head-to-head points per game of the 3 for the entire season.
He walked more. I would guess he walked more and struck out less than both of them. He might have had as many walks as Churio and Merrill combined, and he only had 51.
But that, like, if he takes the step forward so many of us are expecting, he's going to get drafted after Churio and Merrill in any league without Doc Eisenhower. But considering he already outperformed them last year in this format, it could be a great bargain at pick 50 where you took him, Chris.
So Jackson Merrill had 29 walks last year. Churio had 39.
It was an exaggeration, but yeah.
And Langford had 51. But he did have more walks than, not combined, but he had more walks than each of them. Yeah. Catching people up on picks, we did see some of those util-only guys go. There was way back at Marcus Semien at 51st overall. Followed that up with Brent Rooker, then Marcelo Zuna, Pablo Lopez, Blake Snell. I took Adley Rutschman, 56th overall.
Thank you for doing that. I might have had some remorse with William Contreras if Rutschman was still there.
Michael Harris was the next pick, then Alex Bregman and CJ Abrams. Scott, you were up. I will just quickly mention why I took Adley Rutschman, and I think this is his better format. Lots of doubles, good plate discipline typically, gets on base a lot, and he's going to play a bunch, get DH opportunities and lots of volume there. Michael King was the top pitcher on my board. I think he takes a hit in this format. He only had 14 quality starts last year. Could be a bit inefficient at times. The walks were up. So I really did want to push the envelope with waiting on pitching in this mock draft and see how it turned out too. So it's 5 pitchers to start my draft. And then Scott, we're over to you who I know you already have 3 hitters. Will you make it 5 as well?
I have 4 hitters. I have Corbin Carroll, Jazz Chisholm.
Will you make it 5 and 6? What will you do?
Yeah. I'm taking 2 pitchers here. So I think, and this happened a little earlier in this draft than it often does, but I think we have crossed the threshold of all the elite hitters being off the board at this point, judging by my own rankings. I got to my pick here at the end of round 5, and the top 8 players on my board were all starting pitchers. So I'm going to take Michael King, who I have a tier above the rest. But I'm also going to take Aaron Nola, who I think is especially good in this format because he's going to give you a ton of volume. He's going to work deep into games consistently. He's going to start every 5th game, which you can't say for like a Shota Imanaga. And you don't have to really worry so much about the ERA like you would in a Roto League.
Mm-hmm. I think that makes a lot of sense. Yep, being a workload. And shout out to everyone else who's drafting in this room because normally there are other pitchers that I feel like I could wait on, the Logan Webbs of the world, and he went in round 4. So I do think Nola and Logan Webb and guys like that, Framber Valdez, they do get pushed up a little bit in this format because obviously they just provide so many innings. After Aaron Nola, there was O'Neal Cruz. I believe Beat On from Razzball has gone 4 straight hitters since starting with pocket aces.
Which is what you have to do.
Interested to see what his team will look like at the end. After O'Neal Cruz, there was Max Fried. And I think the way things are shaping out, I probably will take my first starting pitcher here. Scott, do you agree with my assessment that Michael King takes a bit of a hit in this format just because he didn't complete 6 innings as much as other quote-unquote aces? Do you think maybe he takes a hit in this format?
He completed 6 innings a lot. Let's see. He got to 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
He got to 6 about less than half the time, I think.
6 times he got to 7, and he made it. He made it to 173 innings at all in his first year as a full-time starter. I get it. I just it's not something I personally worry about with him. I think they're going to treat him like a workhorse.
All right. After Max Fried, there was Yoshinobu Yamamoto. I took Shota Imanaga as my SP1, and typically, I wouldn't love that being my SP1, but we'll see how the pitching staff turns out. After that pick, there was Josh Naylor, 66th overall. I think that's maybe a little bit earlier than he goes, but makes a lot of contact, doesn't strike out, which is good in this format. And then Luis Castillo is the next pick.
I think we're seeing what I said at the top of the show. The mid-range at starting pitcher are going to get pushed up because I feel like we're not used to seeing Max Scherzer and Luis Castillo go as early as round 6 this year, but only 9 hitter spots to fill, and you need lots of pitching depth.
You said Max Scherzer, Scott.
Max Fried, sorry. Max Fried. We're not used to seeing Max Fried and Luis Castillo. I'm making a salient point, but I just say the wrong names, and that's all anybody hears. They completely lose the point.
Max Scherzer may be on the brain because he made his Blue Jays debut here.
He did
on Tuesday. 2 innings, 1 run, 4 strikeouts. He had 8 whiffs on 34 pitches. So he
looked all right.
Good. I think he could still be effective when he does pitch this season, Max Scherzer, which I know we're kind of going off on a tangent now, but it's just a matter of how many starts is he going to make. I think that's probably the biggest question for him at this point.
He'll get drafted in this league. Only 252 players, but he'll be one of them.
I think as a bench pitcher in this format, that does make sense. And when he's healthy, I think he'll have free reign to go 6+ innings as long as he is effective, which again, I think that will be the case when he's healthy. After Luis Castillo, Tyler Glasnow, who I debated taking with my pick. I think taking Glasnow is more defensible in this format just because the replacement value is better. I mean, I know a lot of pitchers get drafted, but if he gets hurt in a 12-team points league, it's just a shallower format. So it's easier to replace than, let's say, in a 12-team or 15-team roto league where, more players are being drafted.
And he averaged 6 innings per start last year. There aren't a lot of pitchers who did. Like he's not
just let him go. Like he was like for them. Yeah.
He's not going to throw a ton of innings in terms of the overall volume, but in terms of how deep he goes, how good he is when he's on the mound, I don't think there's any question that Tyler Glasnow is an ace. It's just, there are limitations to how valuable he will be.
After Glasnow, there was Matt McClain and Jordan Westberg. Chris, you are up. Let's check in on the team, see how it's going so far. You have Ketel Marte, Wyatt Langford, Shohei Ohtani, and then Dylan Cease and Corbin Burns. You just selected Teoscar Hernandez.
Yeah, I'm fine. It's fine.
Are you tilting, Chris?
No, I don't tilt. I don't. That's not
your style, huh?
That's uncouth, frankly. It would be embarrassing to tilt, but I'm not. I'm not super thrilled with how this draft has gone for me so far, and I feel like I'm going to have to take some swings at hitter, and Wyatt Langford is one of them. Teoscar Hernandez, probably not really a swing there, but we'll see.
Do you wish you could focus on pitchers right now instead of hitters?
I generally think the best players on the board right now are pitchers. We've hit the good glob and there are plenty of options left. It's just that because I had to take Dylan Cease when Brent Rooker and Marcell Ozuna and Marcus Semien were still on the board, it kind of just makes it a little more narrow for me, I think.
All right, after you took Teoscar Hernandez, we got Vinny P.
Baby.
Vinny Pasquantino to finish out round 6. Let's take
he didn't make it to round 8.
No, he did not.
I almost took him there.
Another break, and we'll be back right after this.
Yeah, we always find our way back home.
Welcome back in Fantasy Baseball Today. It's a live 12-team head-to-head points mock draft. And after Vinny P, we are into round 7. The first pick of round 7 was Anthony Santander, followed by Chris Towers, who took... Did you mean to make that pick, Chris?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I said we're going to take some swings. Jacob deGrom is a swing. And it's similar to what we talked about with Tyler Glasnow, where I don't expect Jacob deGrom to make it through the whole season, but when he's upright, I don't think there's any question that he's going to have a target of 6 innings every time out. He's going to get 8 or 9 strikeouts in every single start. He's going to be really good when he's up there. It's just, do I get 5 starts or do I get 25 starts? That's the question. But typically he goes higher than this.
He'll get 10 starts.
Hey, it could be 15.
Okay.
It's definitely going to be.
He does
a factor of 5, though. I think we can all agree on that.
He does usually go earlier than 74th. So I still want to take him 74th, but it is relative to ADP of value here.
And there we go. 75th overall, Bo Bichette. So I hope both of you guys have a shortstop already. He's gone.
Well, here's the one thing about Bo Bichette, I think we're about to say the same point. So, Scott, you can say it.
Well, I was going to make this point about Bo Bichette here at 75, and actually the same drafter took Jordan Westberg last round 70. Those are players we talk about a lot on this podcast, and we like a lot. Definitely better in Roto. Definitely better. So to pay the upcharge, because Scott and Chris are in this draft, to pay the upcharge for Jordan Westberg and Bo Bichette, I don't know that that's an upcharge I want to pay. Even Bo Bichette's good years, he's barely getting to 3 points per game.
Yeah.
Because the lack of walks really hurts both of them, Westberg and Bichette.
Fair enough. After Bo Bichette, we saw Bryce Miller, Christian Walker, Tristan Casas, and Emmanuel Clase go. And I am up. There was a pitcher down here somewhere. Yes, Bailey Ober. So my team will probably lead the league in home runs allowed. I've got Bailey Ober and Shota Imanaga, but my first 2 pitchers after starting with 5 hitters, I think it's okay. We'll see how it turns out.
And I do want to make one more point about Jordan Westberg, because I wrote a piece today. We love him. He was he one of the players one of us loved?
Yes, I believe it was you, Chris.
Yeah, that sure. Who's keeping track of these things? I'm a big fan. For all the reasons we've talked about, but it is a little concerning to be as invested as we are in a guy who has really bad plate discipline. He hits the ball hard and he's a good athlete, and all the things that we like about Jordan Westberg are all true, but we also just saw him put up a sub 5% walk rate, which is one of the worst marks for a regular player in baseball. And he chases a decent amount, and he tends to make damage when he does make contact. So it usually works for him, or at least it did last year. But remember, when Jordan Westberg got called up, he was not like the be all end all prospect like Gunnar Henderson or Jackson Holiday or Kobe Mayo. He was definitely a little bit of a forgotten man among this Orioles crop. And we loved the rookie season he put together. We thought he was great. All that stuff is true. But I put together this year's blank for tomorrow's newsletter. And for this year's Nolan Jones, I picked Jordan Westberg as one of the candidates, because I could see it going wrong for sure.
So you love him, but you're acknowledging he could be a bust.
I mean, he could break our hearts. Yeah. People you love break your heart all the time.
I looked into that a little bit more with the plate discipline. In the minors, Westberg walked a lot more. Look, obviously things change. You can't just translate numbers from the minors, but he posted good OBPs in the minors, and it was a 7% walk rate in 2023 when he first got called up. So I think there's room for him to walk a little bit more. I don't think he's ever going to walk like 10, 12% of the time, but I think he can get up to that like 6, 7, 8% walk rate.
I think that's totally reasonable. Yeah.
Yep. After I took Bailey Ober, Spencer Schwellenbach, maybe I should have taken him, because now my heart is broken. After Schwellenbach, Mike Trout, Junior Caminero. Wait, Junior Caminero.
Caminero!
Ha Caminero! Scott, I hope you weren't going to take Junior Caminero.
I was not. I already have a third baseman.
All right.
I was thinking about Trout. It might be the point to take him, so I'm glad Nathan Judah spared me from doing that. I am going to fill out my outfield here, though. A couple of outfielders. I feel like I'm ahead of where I normally am at starting pitcher with Aaron Nola and Michael King, my last 2 picks. But I want to make sure I have a star-studded lineup. So I'm going to take the chance on Lawrence Butler, who from that magical date, July 1st on, averaged 3.9 points per game last year. And I'm going to take Christian Yelich, who's, of course, risky coming back from back surgery, but it sounds like he'll be ready for the start of the season. He's scheduled to play in a game, I think, March 5th, I saw, spring game. And last year, for the time he was healthy, more points per game than Mookie Betts. So this is definitely his format. A good walker. Filling out my outfield, Lawrence Butler, Christian Yelich to go with Corbin Carroll. And if I can backtrack here for a second and mention, I was unsure whether I wanted to take Vladimir Guerrero with my second pick, because this isn't his best format. And I feel like in points leagues, Guerrero loses some value at the top. And then in the middle, Josh Naylor, Vinny Pasquantino gained some value. Both averaged more than 3 points per game last year, but they both went in round 6. So I wouldn't have realistically have had a shot at them. So I think if I do think it, let's put it this way. If you're on the fence early about whether to take first base or another position and you're torn between them, I'd probably lean first base. That's what I did there with Guerrero and Lindor. And I think at this point I could say I'm happy with my choice.
You know, Scott, I am missing a first and second baseman right now, and I just looked at those positions. Not great. Don't feel great about not having a first or second baseman. And I feel like whenever I take a catcher early in a one-catcher league, I end up regretting it just because there are so many good catchers that
guys fall,
just kind of fall through the cracks.
Yeah, but
So
they're not. They're good in the sense that they're better than we expect a catcher to be, but they don't compare to William Contreras, and they don't compare to a normal Adley Rutschman.
No.
Right.
No, I mean, Adley Rutschman was viewed as a legitimate difference maker in this format, more so even than a Roto league. And he was until the injury last year. So I expect Adley Rutschman to have 450 points at least in this format.
Yeah. And I am on the clock. The last couple picks, Strider, Seiya Suzuki, Luis Robert.
I wondered if Strider would go about here.
Yep. And
86th overall. That's what, about 40 spots higher than ADP, but of course I'm talking Roto ADP, and I think starting pitchers are going earlier in general at this point in the draft.
Yeah. So
and it's fine. A Strider was like my second or third highest ranked pitcher left. I'm higher on him than the consensus, though.
My highest rated hitter was Brian Reynolds. I could use an outfielder. He just doesn't feel like a difference maker, and maybe he'll last a little bit longer. Nope, he went with the very next pick, so that's fine. But I looked at the outfield position. There's other players that are really good in this format, so I chose to keep building out my pitching staff, and so far I've got Shota Imanaga, Bailey Ober, and Sonny Gray.
I didn't take you for a Sonny Gray guy. You like him more in this format specifically? Because I feel like there are a lot of similar range targets out there that I could see you going for instead.
No, I mean, I think you could probably argue maybe he's a little bit worse in this format. I just don't know that he's super efficient, but I like what we saw last year from a skills perspective. So as my SP3 in this range of the pitcher rankings, I'm fine with taking him this year. I really like what we saw from him last season. I don't know that the skills will be as good because he really was, by all accounts, performed like a top 12, top 15 starting pitcher. But yeah, I'm totally fine with him as like a SP3 this upcoming season. After Sonny Gray, Brian Reynolds, Salvador Perez, and Willy Adames. Yes, we need more catchers to be drafted so that other positions can fall for me. We are here in round 8. Willy Adames, I think the ADP is in like the 60-70 range, and he falls to 92nd here, which in a points league probably makes sense. That's just much more palatable to take Adames in round 8 than the round 6 I think he normally goes in. Then Mark Vientos, who obviously
probably worse in this format.
Yeah, made a huge impact last season, was great in the playoffs. He's going to hit for a lot of power, but
2.8 points per game for Vientos last year. And I know I have him as a bust anyway. I don't expect him to live up to that. I don't know if you guys do too.
Yeah.
Or if it's just me.
I didn't write him up as a bust, but he's kind of in a void. I guess I'm not as vehement as calling him a bust, but yeah, he's not really someone I've been targeting.
Yeah, I did a kind of the all boomer bust team for Tuesday's newsletter, and Vientos is like the boomer bust third baseman, and I tried to come up with like a little clever way to explain like what the upside and downside for each one was. And with Vientos, I just kind of went with the good Eugenio Suarez years versus the bad Eugenio Suarez years. And we've seen like things can get pretty ugly for Eugenio Suarez. And I think that's like Vientos has real frightening plate discipline metrics. He overperformed his expected stats by quite a bit. I think around here is where he should go around, but I don't know if I've drafted him yet.
Mm-hmm. After Vientos, there was Justin Steele. Chris, you selected Zach Gallen, and then Hunter Green and Grayson Rodriguez. We are here into round 9, and Chris, you are back on the clock. I believe you already have 4 starting pitchers.
Was that 4?
Yeah, you have Grom, Cease, Burns, and Zach Gallen.
That was a great choice, Zach Gallen, for this format. He had been my highest ranked pitcher for a while.
Yeah.
sort of like Aaron Nola, he's going to give you volume. And so I think we're not regarding Gallen as an ace anymore in 5x5 leagues, but he's still kind of a borderline ace in this format, I think.
He wasn't last year, but there was some weird control things. There was the hamstring injury that he dealt with, but 537 and 553 points in the previous 2 seasons is absolutely ace level production. So even if you just split the difference, it gets him, it makes him one of the better values here.
Mm-hmm. With the next pick, Chris, you selected Royce Lewis. Are you back in on Royce Lewis this year?
Oh yeah. I think I'm significantly higher on Royce Lewis than you guys are. And I think the problem with Royce Lewis and the problem with the discourse around Royce Lewis is there's so much focus on like the good stretch and then the bad stretch. And he's played 152 major league games. He's hit 268 with 33 homers, 81 runs, 104 RBI, and 6 steals. I kind of just take that at face value. Like maybe there's a path to more upside. Maybe there's a little bit of risk, but on the whole, that's more or less what I expect from a full season of Royce Lewis, which obviously
the problem is,
should you expect a full season from Royce Lewis? No.
Well, it's its own problem. Yeah. But the other problem is that full season of stats he compiled over 3 seasons with frequent interruptions.
I mean, for the most part, over 2. It was only 12 games in 2022. I just want to point that out. Let's be fair to my guy Royce.
Normally, we wouldn't consider even a full season of data enough to evaluate a player. And the fact that it was spread over that length of time, I just don't really know what Royce Lewis is. He's probably better than the 58 game stretch we saw. Well, he's almost certainly better than the 58 game stretch he saw. But I don't know that I'm totally sure he's as good as his career numbers. He could be. I just don't know. At pick 98, is it worth taking the shot? Yeah, that's about where I rank him. But yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't say
I get it. But look, I'm not 100% sure how good any player is. There is variance for every player. Obviously, with Royce Lewis, it's wider. But my point is more that I don't think it's helpful to look at 2023 and say, God, imagine what could be, because it was 58 games. I also don't think it's all that helpful to look at the final 58 games or whatever it was you said from last year and say, that's who he is. I think if I'm working from a baseline, it's more or less what he's been overall. And that should be a very good player in this format. It's not a superstar, probably. I think it comes out to like a right around 450 points over 152 games. Obviously, the injury concerns are what they are, but this is a format where if I really need to, I would guess Ryan McMahon or Josh Young will be available on waivers to start the season. And if something happens, I can go add somebody. So I'm more willing to take those kind of chances aiming for upside in this format.
After Chris selected Royce Lewis, there was Riley Green, Stephen Kwan, Joe Ryan, Brandon Nimmo, Freddie Peralta. I selected Hunter Brown, and then Cal Raleigh, Jack Flaherty, and Roki Sasaki. I mean, leading up to my pick, all the players I was looking at, I just got cleaned out. That was brutal. And Scott, with that, we are over to you at the 9-10 turn.
Yeah. So Brandon Nimmo was somebody I hope to grab for my utility spot at some point. Obviously, that won't be an option, but he is great in this format. He's underrated in this format, even for going 102nd. Trying to pull up the number, 2.95 points per game, and remember that was in an awful season by Nimmo standards. A lot of pitchers have gone off the board since my last pair of picks, which you'll remember was Lawrence Butler and Christian Yelich. So we're almost out of the good glob here. So I want to take a couple of those pitchers. I'm trying to focus on ones that are best for this format specifically, because here at the end of the good glob, we have a lot of high variance types like Kodai Senga, Jack Flaherty. I think Flaherty's still out there, right? He hasn't been taken.
Yeah, he's there.
Yeah. No. He did get taken.
Yeah.
Brian Wu, another got injury-prone player specifically.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think for this format specifically, what they provide on a per start basis is enough for me to pass up Seth Lugo. I think Lugo is, you're going to appreciate his floor a lot more in this format. We talk about his lack of ceiling, how he'll never reach what he did last year again, and that's probably true. But he's a workhorse on what should be a pretty good team. And I think he'll keep his ERA in the mid threes at least. So I think he'll be fine here as my fourth starter. I'm pairing him with Tanner Bybee, who maybe has a little untapped upside, but mainly I'm targeting him because I see him as durable relative to some of the others here.
Seth Lugo, second in baseball in innings pitched last season. He was also tied for second with 22 quality starts. He was the SP5 in total head-to-head points. Again, that was Seth Lugo. We are into round 10, and Scott led it off with Tanner Bybee, as he mentioned. Bybee, to this point in his career, has been inefficient. I think there's a chance that he just gets better and they give him more of a leash and let him go deeper into games. But that is the hope that moving forward, we can start to get more 6-7 inning outings from Tanner Bybee. After that, we saw Devin Williams go 110th overall. I believe, is that the RP2? It's a second closer drafted, right? Because Emmanuel Clase, I believe, went in round 7. So this is a good just reminder, I guess, for people who maybe play in this format on CBS, where relievers don't get as many fantasy points. They do fall typically. Devin Williams here in round 10. Emmanuel Clase didn't go to round 7. Whereas typically in a roto draft, those guys will go in round 4, round 5, round 6, something like that. So,
and maybe that's why it seems like some of the starting pitchers and some of the hitters like Nimmo are getting pushed up because everybody's had the discipline to avoid closers through 9 rounds.
Yep. And after Devin Williams, we got Kodai Senga, the last remaining starting pitcher in the Mets rotation. Hopefully, knock on wood. We need him to stay healthy. But yep, I believe the debut, spring debut for Senga should be coming soon. I believe that I read that somewhere, but so far it sounds like all systems go for Kodai Senga here and the New York Mets. I am on deck. I've got, to this point, 4 starting pitchers and 2, 4, 5 hitters. I'm just going to wait at first and second because there's not really anything that seems like a difference maker at those positions. I passed up on outfield early on because I said, I don't want to fill it too soon. And now it's starting to dwindle a little bit. But I will take Ian Happ, someone I think is a little bit better in this format. He averaged 3 fantasy points per game last season. And, I was talking about Brian Reynolds, I think in round 6 or 7. Ian Happ averaged more fantasy points than him. And I just got him, 3 or 4 rounds later. So,
and that is consistent for him. Ian Happ, sort of like Brandon Nimmo. Very underrated in this format. Those walks make a big difference.
Yeah.
So I would have loved to take him as my utility player. I was feeling the urgency to take pitchers.
No, I think that makes sense. And Ian Happ also the leadoff hitter for what should be a pretty good Chicago Cubs lineup this season. After Ian Happ, we see JT Realmuto come off the board. And Chris, you are up in
4 picks.
4 picks. Let's check in on your team, see what you got going on. You've got Ketel Marte at second, Royce Lewis at third, Teoscar Hernandez and Wyatt Langford in your outfield, Shohei Ohtani at utility, and then 4 starting pitchers, Jacob deGrom, Dylan Cease, Corbin Burns, and Zach Gallen. You will be hard-pressed to find a better rotation than that in this league.
Yeah, I mean, there are a few other teams that have 4 starters. Scott has 4, but he waited longer, so...
I have 4, but I also...
Yeah. I do. We'll see. Let's screw it. We'll have the conversation now because it was something I was thinking of earlier, and I'm going to take this guy if he's still there in 1 pick, and it's Yainer Diaz, who we view as one of the catchers who's likely to give you a big playing time edge. This isn't his best format, but I think this price would be fine if he goes here. But what I want to ask you guys is, with all the talk of Yordan Alvarez trying to stick as much as possible to the DH this year, and Christian Walker signing and being obviously a big upgrade over what they got out of the first base position last year, are we overrating Yainer Diaz?
I'm not sure he's going to get as much volume as the names that are going right around him. Salvador Perez, and even the name that went just before him, Wilson Contreras.
Yeah.
If he's healthy, I would project more plate appearances for him than I think Yainer Diaz.
Yeah, Yainer Diaz got 619 last year. That was, I believe, 102 starts at catcher, 11 at first base, and the rest
36
at DH.
at DH.
So, maybe he catches more, but that's not necessarily a good thing because it's more wear and tear. It's something that I hadn't really thought about before I was reading something today about Yordan Alvarez. And it's something to keep in mind when we're talking about Yainer Diaz moving forward.
I think especially in a points league where you need the volume more. And he's not as good in points leagues anyway because the walk rate is non-existent for Yainer Diaz. But I in Roto, it's a different story because he's obviously such a specialist for batting average at that position, just kind of a one-of-one type player. But, if you're debating Yainer Diaz or Salvador Perez or maybe even Cal Raleigh in that group, it's something to think about even in Roto.
Mm-hmm. We are into round 11, and the last pick of round 10 was Brian Wu, and then kicked off round 11 with Spencer Steer, who I was monitoring because I don't have a first baseman.
Yeah, he had been bouncing around the top of the queue for a long time, and I thought about it there. And it's one of those ones where, like, we don't view him as a good choice for this league, this format, but he has actually gotten to 450 points each of his first 2 years.
He has good plate discipline. Really.
He's a good starter. It's just how much safety do we think there is? Probably not very much.
Yeah. The fact that he could play so many positions, I feel.
I think the playing time is safe. It just, the skill set, like, especially if they decided to trade him, I think things could go really south. And there are no rumors right now, but it seems like something that could very easily happen.
Yeah. After Spencer Steer, Jurickson Profar, Sandy Alcantara, Yandy Diaz, and Brenton Doyle. I was wondering when the slide for Brenton Doyle would end. He does strike out quite a bit. The home road splits. There's going to be inconsistency in a head-to-head format. We actually spoke about that on yesterday's podcast, but he's someone we usually see go as like a top 75 pick in a Roto or categories league, and here he lasts till 125.
He's probably one of the players with the biggest gap in what you should expect from him in points versus Roto, because he was a top 40 player in Roto overall last season, and he didn't come close to 3 points per game last year. Looking at it,
2.84 higher than I thought. But the thing is, it's a head-to-head league. And so when there's a full week on the road for the Rockies, do you even want to start him?
Yeah.
Probably not, no.
Do you think this is an okay range to draft him, 125th?
Yeah.
Sandy Alcantara, just wanted to quickly mention with him, when he is at his best, he is a workhorse. There was some talk that he could be limited early on in the season. He's coming back from Tommy John surgery, obviously. But again, when he's at his best, this would be a pretty good format for somebody like Sandy Alcantara. I am on the clock. I don't know exactly what I want to do. I still need a first and a second baseman, and like Jake Berger's there, but he's got terrible plate discipline.
This is a bad format for him, even if you expect the RBI to go up this year.
Luis Garcia is the top of the queue at
bad format for him unless you think he's going to play every day.
You know what? I'm going to go ahead and take Carlos Rodon. This feels a little bit later than usual for him. He's not somebody I typically target, but last year when healthy, the Yankees let him go. He regularly went 6 innings when he wasn't giving up a ton of home runs.
As long as he was able to get through the first.
So at this point,
and he won 15 games, which is or 16 games, which is important in this format.
Yeah. I just feel like these are just pitchers that I don't wind up drafting, and it feels weird to have them on my team. After I took Carlos Rodon, Isaac Paredes, Will Smith, Scott, I'm going to assume that was an Isaac Paredes.
I was warming up to take Paredes. I checked. I bothered to look up what because obviously he was bad last year with the time in Chicago. In 2023, his time in Tampa, 3.06 points per game. And I expect him to be at least that good in Houston. So he would have been a great pick now. I don't have a second baseman yet. I could have planned to move Jazz Chisholm there and have Paredes as my third baseman. It was all going to work out great. till Devin Milligan had to go and take him instead. So now what? I could do the same thing with Matt Chapman. I don't like it as much, particularly in this format. But I think I will do it. He was 2.9 last year. And Matt Chapman. Yeah. 2.99 points. So 3 points per game last year. And I don't expect much of a step back. I know you guys do.
I like Matt Chapman. I don't have a problem with it.
Okay. I know Chris does. Chris, you have a problem with it. Don't tell me
hate
otherwise.
it.
Don't lie and tell me otherwise. All right. So for my next trick, I don't know. Pitching's starting to look pretty bad. I took a couple of safe options last time, especially Seth Lugo. Maybe not safe is the best word, but floor options. I'm going to take an upside option here. Still in the good glob. There's only a couple pitchers left. I'm going to take Jared Jones, who just made his first spring start on Tuesday.
Yep.
And he had talked about working on a 2-seamer to pair with the 4-seamer. He threw it, I believe, 19% of the time. So he legitimately used it. Had a nice whiff rate. His swinging strike rate was something that collapsed over the course of last year. So I was encouraged by the little bit we saw from him in his first spring start. And I think everybody knows Jared Jones has a lot of upside. So it's my 5th starter, an upside pick there in Jared Jones.
All right. That is the end of round 11. We are into round 12. Here is what we are going to do. We're going to wrap up part 1 of this mock draft on the audio side. This will be a 2-part podcast. Should have mentioned that up at the top. But be sure to join us for part 2 so you can hear the second half of the draft and our team recaps. Welcome back to part 2 of our 12-team head-to-head points mock draft on Wednesday, February 26th. We left off in round 12, where Scott started it off with Jared Jones, and then Jason Dominguez was the next pick up. Still waiting to find out what the Yankees lineup construction will be this season. In their first spring training game, Jason Dominguez led off, but then I believe in the next one he was batting cleanup. So
they've had him, Anthony Volpe, Cody Bellinger, and Ben Rice all start a spring game.
I believe Jazz led off one too.
Yeah, Jazz also, yes.
Yep. After Dominguez, there was Kevin Gausman and Mason Miller. I am up. Let's see. What do I have on this team? I still need an outfielder. I need a first baseman, second baseman. Look, guys, I don't like this team. I do not. I don't like this.
I'm not thrilled.
Oh man,
I like mine.
Winding up with a lot of players that I just normally don't draft. And look, shout out to the room, man. They're doing a good job. They're drafting head-to-head points league players at the appropriate time when they should. So they're making it more difficult, which obviously has put me in a bit of a bind here. I don't like any of these outfielders for points league. So I'm going to go ahead. I know Luis Garcia is my top-ranked second baseman. I'm going to take Xander Bogaerts instead to fill out my second base spot. I still think when he's healthy, when he's Xander Bogaerts, going to hit a lot of doubles. He's going to get on base, not going to strike out all that much. So I don't think he's amazing, but I think he'll be fine. He'll be a low-end starter in this format.
Yeah, better in this format because the strikeout to walk ratio is generally pretty good. It's just there's a lot of second, and those are the two positions I haven't filled yet, second base and shortstop. And it feels like there's a lot of alike options left. Like the depth of shortstop in particular really shows in a league where there's no middle infield spot.
And even second base, we talked about it on the position preview. It's not deep with difference makers, but it's got a lot of guys who are pretty good. I think that's more true in a roto league because you do have, some specialists like Jimenez and Bryson Stott who are going to steal some bases. But I think Jonathan India should be pretty good in a points league. I think Nico Horner, if he's healthy, should be pretty good in a points league.
Brandon Lau, I know you guys like.
Yeah, I think he's more of a roto option because he does get more time off than you'd like. But, Jackson Holiday looks like he's got the inside track to a second base job. They are still, people covering the Red Sox are still talking about Christian Campbell as if he's got a chance to break camp, but it's unclear how that would actually work. And
that
it would
seems
require
like the biggest spring storyline is just, can Christian Campbell force the Red Sox into an uncomfortable situation with Rafael Devers?
Yeah. So yeah, that is still an option, and he's still in the late round discussion as a result. So yeah, I think second base is actually an okay position, even if it's relatively weak in terms of those impact guys. Although Jess Chisholm and possibly Mookie Betts, and there's someone else I'm forgetting who should gain second base eligible. Oh, Alex Bregman potentially early on. Matt McClain. So yeah, there should be some cavalry coming at second base.
Though while we were talking, there was just a big second base run. It's worth noting.
Yeah, after I took Bogarts, there was Bryce Terang, Zach Eflin, Luis Garcia from the Nationals, Jonathan India, who is now on the Royals, and Christopher Sanchez, who made his spring debut here on Tuesday. And there was no StatCast data for that game, but I did see a tweet from Matt Gelb, who covers the Phillies, and he said
his velocity was up.
The stadium said Christopher Sanchez's fastball was at 96, 97 miles per hour. So something to watch there.
I don't know that we want that from him because he tried it last year.
There was some loss of command as a result of it.
Yeah. And not really an improvement in results. It seemed like when he took velocity off mid-season, was back to being an elite strike thrower. That's when Sanchez was at his best. But I don't know. In the long run, I suspect he'll have a good season again. I think he's underrated generally. I just don't know that for him specifically, improved velocity is something I'm celebrating.
After Christopher Sanchez, there was Carlos Correa, who went to Chris, and then Bowden Francis and Byron Buxton.
I should have gone
Sparp here.
I should have gone Bowden Francis with my first pick there.
I was going to ask, are you controlling both your team and Nick Fox's team? Because those feel like players I don't know.
I wasn't going to take Buxton there, but Francis for sure. I want to get some Sparp options.
But
now the concern is, in terms of ADP, the next Sparp shouldn't go off the board for a long time. But obviously, once the first one goes, maybe sometimes the second one goes, and maybe sometimes the second one goes literally right now.
And that is Jackson Jobe, who Chris just took in round 13. I do wonder if
it's a reach.
It's a player that makes sense to reach for, given the ups. Like, I think he's just being undervalued at this point, Jobe.
But do you think...
I don't care for Jobe, is what people are saying.
I was going to ask, do you think pulling up Sparps and taking them at this point over established high-end closers like Raisel Iglesias and Ryan Helsley, is that maybe getting a little bit too cute in this format?
Maybe. It's possible. I would quibble with Ryan Helsley as an established high-end closer in a points league, because he certainly was last year when he saved 49 games. He had never had more than 375 points in this format before. And so, it's probably a low 80s win team. Raisel Iglesias, I think that's a fair question, because he does seem like a pretty safe bet, although he's not a guy who typically puts up hugely robust save totals. So I don't know. Like, I think Jackson Jobe's upside is comparable to those guys. Obviously, if they have a 45 save season, then they'll blow him out of the water. But 140 innings from Jackson Jobe could absolutely still be a 400-point player. And that's what you should be expecting from the non-elite closers.
You were upset about missing out on Bowden Francis with your round 12 pick, but I want to draw attention to the guy you actually took, which is Carlos Correa, who at this point in the draft I was hoping I'd get as my
I knew that was your plan at shortstop. Yeah,
points per game last year, obviously missed a lot of time with plantar fasciitis, but points per game, Carlos Correa 3.33. It was about the same as Trey Turner, who went in round 2. And of course, you got to factor in some injury risk. I think it's a little overblown with Correa, but yeah, he tends to have at least one IL stint a season. But in a shallow league like this, the waiver wire is bursting with reasonable starters. And even not studs, but reasonable starters. You want that studly per game production, particularly at this late stage of the draft.
And because I like I said, I had to take some swings, and I think we're going to get to the end and we're going to look at my team and there's going to be a lot of risk there. And okay, that's fair. That will be a fair criticism to make of this team, but I think circumstances dictated it to a certain extent. And I kind of decided to lean into the curve or steer into the curve a little bit.
I mean, shallow league like this, that's the time to take some risks.
Mm-hmm. Let's catch people up on some picks. After Chris took Jackson Jobe, there was Ronaldo Lopez, Ryan Jeffers. Bit of a head scratcher. There's some other, top 10, top 12 catcher options available.
If you don't have a catcher now in a one catcher 12-team league like this,
should be your last pick.
Just wait until the end of the draft. Jeffers probably would have been there. If not him, somebody just like him.
Yeah. After Jeffers, there was Raisel Iglesias, Felix Bautista, and Cedric Mullins. So I am on the clock, and I am debating a few different things. But let's check out here. What's going on? What do you guys have? All right. I don't think I need to do that. So I will go ahead and take I will take Ryan Helsley because, like I just said, I mean, I still think he's an elite option, and he's here in round 13. I just got him 152nd overall, so I will take that discount. At some point, it is worth grabbing closers in this format. And I will point out what I just did. I feel like other people should make use of this function in the CBS draft room. If you go to roster grid and you change it by draft order, you can see the teams drafting after you and what positions they have. And so I just did that, and I figured, okay, maybe I can wait on this player based on the positions that have already been filled.
I just loved listening to your internal monologue there. That's my favorite part of these shows. It's just hearing Frank squirm.
I hate this team. Maybe I'm being too hard on myself. We'll see how it looks at the end. After Ryan Helsley, there's Nathan Eovaldi, the old wily veteran. Still solid as long as he's healthy. Jose Barrios should provide a lot of innings in this format. Scott, you are on deck. Let's check back in, see what you've got going on.
Do it.
What are you?
Check it out.
What are you in need of? So you got William Contreras, Vlad Jr., Jazz Chisholm. You've got Christian Yelich, Lawrence Butler, Corbin Carroll, Matt Chapman in your utility spot. But if we were playing this out, you can move Jazz to second base after the season starts. And then for your pitchers, you've got Aaron Nola, Seth Lugo, Michael King, Jared Jones, and Tanner Bybee. So you are now up. And Clay Holmes is gone, the third spot.
Okay, yeah, I was gonna say Scott was gonna take Clay Holmes here if that hadn't happened.
That probably should have been on my mind, yes. But since he was taken ahead of my pick, it's a moot point. I want to see. Yeah, I thought so. Randy Arozarena was pretty much back to normal the final 4 months this past year.
And held his own in Seattle, which is always a question.
And in 2023, I wanted to check because you wouldn't think this is his best format. 3.09 points per game.
And I think he was right around there in 2022 as well.
Yeah, he was definitely must start 2 years ago. I will take him with the intention of sliding him to utility once Jazz Chisholm picks up eligibility at second base, sliding Chapman to third.
Are you serious?
About what?
I did not take Randy Arozarena because everyone had outfield filled after me, and I was like, Randy Arozarena with my next pick. And
I'm sorry.
All right, well, there goes that.
Okay, so I kind of went a little boring with my early pitcher picks, ones like Aaron Nola and Seth Lugo, certainly. I want to go aggressive now with the later picks once I've got a good foundation at starting pitcher, so I'm going to take Robbie Ray.
I was going to take him. I have a talking point.
I think we all
a good time to use it.
Chris,
he is he spent the offseason texting back and forth with Tarek Skubal.
Good guy to text with.
Yeah, he wanted to develop a changeup. Robbie Ray's never really had a good changeup, and he was talking about how he's not really a pronator. He doesn't like move his arm the way that you usually want to if you throw a good changeup. And he decided to reach out to Tarek Skubal because he has a similar delivery. And he said Tarek Skubal sent him like 8 million pictures and videos of him throwing a changeup. And so he's working on that. He threw a couple of them in his first spring start. Just one thing to look at. But Love to see a guy still trying to work. We saw some upside from him last year in the 7 starts he made.
The fact that the velocity coming back from Tommy John surgery was back up to his Cy Young season. It didn't last long. Like the hamstring injury happened, and so it kind of got swept under the rug. But that was an exciting development for Robbie Ray. Obviously an injury risk, but as my 6th starter here in round round
totally
14
fine.
in a shallow league, I'm doing it.
Yeah, I thought about taking him with my previous pick. If he had made it back, I definitely would have taken him.
If I didn't fill my 5 starters by now, and I didn't take Rodon a couple of rounds ago, I was waiting on Robbie Ray to be my SP5 because I am, the optimism is growing here with this new changeup and the fact that last year velocity being up 16% swinging strike rate. So I think there's a little bit of excitement there with someone like Robbie Ray. We are into round 14. Let's take a quick break and we'll catch you up right after this.
The clock never stops. Relive the greatest moments with uninterrupted highlights and more. It's Gareth Bale! Ronaldo! Wonderful goal! On the UEFA Champions League channel. Streaming free.
Welcome back in Fantasy Baseball. Today we are live streaming a 12-team head-to-head points mock draft, and we are in round 14. We left off with Robbie Ray, Taylor Ward, Alec Boehm, Brandon Lau. I took Adolis Garcia, and then there was Andres Munoz. So I did want Randy Arozarena. The plate discipline's a little bit better. He walks, he gets on base more than someone like Garcia does.
He's underrated in this format.
I have just a bit of a feeling that Adolis Garcia is going to bounce back this season. He says he's healthy. He says the knees feel good. I just feel really good about the Rangers lineup too. If they can all just stay healthy, which Wyatt Langford right now is not, unfortunately. But if they are, they've got Langford, they've got Seager, Semien, Adolis Garcia. They traded for Jake Berger. This is a deep lineup. This is a really deep Rangers lineup. So I am looking for them to bounce back as a whole this upcoming season. After Andres Munoz, there was Nolan Arenado, who remains on the St. Louis Cardinals, and just one of the weirder storylines this offseason is Arenado voiding an Astros trade, says he wants to go to a team where he can win. Can't really imagine a better spot than Houston for Nolan Arenado and his specific swing. But I don't know if anything's going to get done before the start of the season. It doesn't seem very likely, I guess, at this point.
Injuries can always happen. I think that's probably the best chance of something now, but yeah, it's not a great situation, unfortunately.
After Arenado, there was Yusei Kikuchi, who signed with the Angels this offseason. Taj Bradley, Tyler O'Neill, who signed with the Orioles, and Chris, we are over to you.
Yeah, we are.
Well, both of us don't have a first baseman, Chris, so I guess we'll be.
Yeah, and the remaining options aren't great. So
Don't you wish you had Vladimir Guerrero?
I'm willing to. Well, I picked second and you picked 13th, so I didn't really have a chance.
You should have taken Chris.
But I'm not. There's no point in taking a first baseman right now. I think there are a ton of very similar options. I don't expect anyone's going to be taking too many of them as DHs or anything. So I'm fine waiting at first base right now.
That's exactly where I'm at. Don't feel great about it, but no really standout options, I guess you could say, at that position. After Tyler O'Neill, you selected Yu Darvish, Chris. Is he your SP5?
He's my SP5, yeah.
Okay.
Just building some depth at this point in the draft.
Next 2 picks were Ronel Blanco, and then the first pick of round 15 is Michael Conforto, 169th overall. I think this is maybe the earliest we've seen him go all offseason.
I really like Michael Conforto's sleeper appeal. I haven't drafted him once yet because it seems like there's always one person in the draft willing to really push the envelope on him rather than letting him fall to his normal spot. So, I mean, I think given the shallowness of this league, round 15, you kind of throw ADP out the window, just take who you believe in. And so it's fine. I just, I hope I get a chance to draft him in some of the leagues that actually count.
Yeah, there is no one, whatever excitement for him exists in the mock drafts we're doing does not seem to be carrying over to any other leagues. His ADP remains close to 300 in the month of February, I believe. So I think you will have some chances when you're drafting with people who don't listen to your podcast where you talk about how much you like him. But every indication is that he's not a platoon bat. Like I was reading a piece just the other day from, I think, MLB.com that there is no sign that Michael Conforto is going to be anything but an everyday player for the Dodgers, which is what we thought.
Introductory press conference about how they think he can handle left-handers.
So it, that's that. Yeah, the Dodgers have some questions about playing time, and I did see today that Hyesung Kim might start in the minors actually, which could answer some of them. But Michael Conforto, if he hits, and the underlying numbers were very good last year still, and it's a massive, massive park upgrade. I think it's a bottom 5 home run park for lefties in San Francisco and a top 5 one in Los Angeles. It could be a really big.
After Conforto, Chris selected Nick Lodolo, and then we got Shane Baz, Ryan Walker, Robert Suarez, Brendan Donovan, and Eugenio Suarez. I am on the clock, and I'm thinking about doing something crazy. Let's see.
We can't miss your. I have a couple things I want to say about the players drafted, but I don't want to miss your internal monologue here. So,
all right. Well, here we go. Internal monologue. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna take the next Sparp, and it's probably too early, but someone we are, I think, collectively excited about is Grant Holmes. He's going to start the season in the Braves rotation. Skills looked great last year. Yeah, I mean,
Alex Anthopoulos seems excited about him, so we think so.
Yeah. So Grant Holmes in the rotation. Once Spencer Strider is back, it's a little less sure, but Ian Anderson didn't look great in his spring debut. And I think if Grant Holmes pitches anywhere close to how he did last season, he will remain in the rotation even after Strider returns. So someone I'm excited about, and maybe a little bit more so in this format where you can use him as a spark.
I hope he does. I'm less sure of it than you are, that he'll remain in the rotation, just because neither he nor Ian Anderson have options. So that's why they're expected to fill the last 2 spots. Grant Holmes has relief experience, and he pitched well in the role. Ian Anderson doesn't. So I hope that's not the determining factor. If Ian Anderson is as underwhelming as I kind of expect him to be, then maybe it'll be a moot point. They'll just need Holmes in because he's the only one pitching well. But if Anderson is pitching well too, I could definitely see Holmes returning to the bullpen when Spencer Strider is back.
After I selected Grant Holmes, there was Dansby Swanson, Yohan Duran, and Luis Heel. Scott, you were up for 2.
Okay, so I wanted to say Ryan Walker went with pick 172 here in round 15. You know, I like Ryan Walker a lot. I think he's a true number 1 type of closer. I was about to abandon my rule of taking a closer with my last couple picks in a head-to-head points league for Ryan Walker because I thought he had a chance to be that impactful. So that was a good pick by Steve Giangaspro. Is that how you say his last name? I wanted to give him a little credit for it because I know we've ragged on some of his picks. He took Ryan Walker. It was a good pick here. Okay. I'm going to take a couple of players who are currently injured, but they don't look like long-term injuries. And these players both have significant upside in this format. And they are Nico Horner, who does actually sound like he'll be ready for opening day. And to put his upside in this format into perspective, 2 years ago, 3.36 points per game. That would have made him easily the second baseman last year. Jose Altuve 3.05 last year. Again, Horner was 3.36 2 years ago. Okay. And then Sean Manaea, of course, is the other one. Not going to let him go to anybody else, not in a format this shallow where he'll be easy enough to stash for hopefully what will just be the first 2 weeks of the season.
All right. So we are into round 16. As Scott just mentioned, he left off there with Sean Manaea, who is dealing with that oblique strain, likely to start the season on the IL. But at this point, Scott, you're drafting him as a bench pitcher, so I think it makes total sense. And once the season starts, you put him on an IL spot, and then you use that roster spot to pick up someone else, speculate on another upside pitcher, someone that flashes in the first week of the season, whatever it might be. So I think that makes sense. Let's check back in. It's about time for my internal monologue. I don't have a first baseman yet. And then it's all reserve picks from there. So Chris, we're on an island, buddy. We're waiting for first base here. So
real quick, did you just say, did you happen to bring this up that I had to fill a second base spot? Like I had to take a second base eligible player, even if I was planning on starting Jazz Chisholm there, I got to fill that spot in the draft. So yeah. Nico Horner also satisfies that purpose, and he might just remain my second baseman. Who knows?
I did not bring that up, so it's a good point that you did mention, Scott. And notice you don't have a shortstop filled yet, so we're all on this island together. We're waiting on one starting position for the final rounds of the draft, and that is the way that the cookie crumbled, unfortunately. After Sean Manaea, there was Tanner Houck of the Red Sox, and then Nick Pivetta, who is now in San Diego. We're hoping bigger ballpark. Maybe he doesn't give up as many home runs as we've seen in years past. And then Ryan Pepiot, who kind of has the opposite problem. There's talent. He's got some upside, but moving from Tropicana Field into George Steinbrenner Field this upcoming season, same dimensions as Yankee Stadium. And he's a fly ball pitcher, does give up some hard contact. So just some concern there about maybe Ryan Pepiot and the rest of the Rays pitchers giving up some more home runs this upcoming season.
Yeah, he's a bust pick for me, but obviously the point we're at in the starting pitcher rankings now, totally fine to gamble on him.
Well, let's take a shot on another pitcher who's going to give up a lot of home runs. That is Brandon Pfaadt, who we learned throughout the pitching previews that I kind of like. And I think neither of you guys really do like.
Yeah, I just added him to Bust 2.0.
He's a weird pitcher because there were some really, really like stunning high points. I think he was one of just a handful of pitchers to have multiple starts of 10 strikeouts and 0 walks last season. I think he had 4 starts of at least 10 strikeouts and
a great stat.
But then like the overall strikeout numbers are pretty like they're not bad, but they're not amazing. And
I know he's someone who ranked highly in K- walk rate, which usually is a good indicator. So,
yeah. But yeah, I can't quite figure him out. Yeah. He had about a strikeout per inning. Very good walk rate, but I do worry that just the stuff isn't good enough to live in the zone as often as he does. And that always is going to lead to inflated ERAs, but
he's an above average bat misser who gives up really hard contact. And he had like a near 7 ERA over the last 2 months. And they have great alternatives. I mean, Ryan Nelson was terrific down the stretch. He doesn't currently have a spot. Neither does Jordan Montgomery, who they're paying a lot of money.
Yeah, I do wonder if they are a candidate to trade at some point. Again, if injuries continue to happen, maybe even the Mets, right? The Mets can use a starting pitcher. So we'll see if that happens. I did just want to mention with Brandon Pfaadt, the skill indicators that we talk about all the time. He did have a 4.71 ERA, but that came with a 3.61 FIP, 3.58 xFIP, 3.65 Sierra, and an 18.8% K- walk rate, which was tied for 16th among qualified starting pitchers. After I selected Brandon Pfaadt, Jesus Luzardo, another mock draft where I don't get Jesus Luzardo. That stinks. Brandon Woodruff, Chris Bubich, Andrew Painter, who I think we're not expecting to see until June or July-ish with the Phillies. Jake Berger, and then Chris, another spark to you, Nick Martinez.
Yep, just gonna like I said in yesterday's podcast, I would like to have 3 sparks to choose from. I want multiple pitching options on my bench to play matchups and to start weeks with. So that's all part of the plan.
All right. Well, Jake Berger's gone, Chris. Who are you going to take as your first baseman now?
The thing is, I was never going to take like Jake Berger, even when he's good, is pretty bad in this format. I'm not actually like, I'm not sure his points per game were better than Michael Toglia's last year. And Michael Toglia was pretty bad in this format. So yeah, I'll play chicken with you, Frank. I don't need to get on that one yet.
Yeah, it's
virtually identical Tolia and Berger points per game last year, though I do expect Berger to be better in the Rangers lineup than the Marlins lineup.
After Nick Martinez, Jeff Hoffman went with the last pick of round 16, expected to be the closer for the Blue Jays. And then first pick of round 17 is Reese Olson, who I believe we all have as a sleeper. At least Scott and I do. Chris, I don't know if you're in on Reese.
I don't think he officially made my list, but yes, in the deeper, in the true meaning of a sleeper, yes, I do like Reese Olson very much. 3 pitches, I believe, with a whiff rate at or above 40%.
2 pitches, yeah.
Just the changeup and slider.
Yeah,
curveball is pretty good too, if I remember correctly.
I think he just has to tweak it a little bit. His fastball gets hit really hard. I think maybe mixing in some more of those secondaries and his sinker could help.
Yeah, I think switching to a primary sinker, at least against right-handed batters, is probably the move. Stick with the four-seamer versus lefties. But yeah, the four-seamer gets crushed. And so it's figuring out the right approach, getting to spots where he can put batters away. Once he gets to those spots, he seems very well equipped to be a good pitcher. And so it's just figuring out what that next step looks like.
After Reese Olson, Chris, you selected Walker Buehler, and then there was Drew Rasmussen, who is a SPARP in this format, hopefully has a spot in the Rays rotation, followed by Jackson Holliday, Mackenzie Gore, Ranger Suarez. I was looking at Mackenzie Gore. I think he's an interesting breakout candidate. I know you're excited about him, Scott, but it's just in a points league, he's so inefficient. He walks so many. I think quality starts are going to be really hard to come by for someone like Mackenzie Gore.
Well, I mean, let me look here. 6 of his last 7 starts, 6 innings or more.
Yeah, for me,
that's the thing about breaking out, is that tends to improve too.
Yeah, for me, it comes down to one, the defense is bad. I think the hope is that it'll be better, but CJ Abrams has been a pretty disastrous shortstop defensively. Sounds like Paul DeYoung is starting at third base for the Nationals. I don't know if we've mentioned that because it doesn't really matter a ton for fantasy, but maybe that's a defensive upgrade. But he's got to be more consistent. He's got to be able to sustain that 96-mile-an-hour velocity with the four-seamer. And his command, Walker Buehler is so weird because he's like
Mackenzie Gore,
excuse me. He's a big lefty who throws 96 to 98 miles per hour and gets crushed by lefties. It's the weirdest thing. He had like an 830 OPS against left-handed batters last season, and it's been that way his entire career. And I don't know if it's his four-seamer command against lefties is especially bad, but he just gets hit really, really hard. And so you would think that would be a natural advantage. If you can get righties out, you should be able to get lefties, and he just hasn't figured that out yet either.
I was gearing up to take Mackenzie Gore for what it's worth. So I was disappointed to see him go.
I was in the mindset of taking him as well.
Yeah.
After Mackenzie Gore, there was Ranger Suarez, Jeffrey Springs, who is now with the Athletics, and then I selected Gavin Williams, who I'm more confused about than anything, but there are smarter people in the industry that seem to like Gavin Williams as a post-hype breakout, and he was a huge prospect and lots of expectations. He had the elbow injury last year, so that was a problem. And here we are in round 17. Scott White gets sniped from Xavier.
Well, a few picks before mine, but yeah, I was gearing up to take Xavier Edwards as my shortstop, who I know it's a little bit ridiculous to point this out, but I will point it out. He averaged 3.46 points per game last year, did Xavier Edwards. Basically the same as Ellie De La Cruz. Don't think he's going to average that many again. But, I mean, the line he put up was similar to what he did at AAA the past couple of years. It's just, we've talked about Xavier Edwards a lot, and it's either going to work or it doesn't. For 70 games last year, it worked. The slap hitting speedster became a thing again in the majors. And, at this point in the draft, it seemed like he had the most upside left among shortstops. So I was willing to gamble on it, knowing the fallback options would be pretty good on the waiver wire.
Yeah, this is his worst format, but he's also
3.46 points per game. I'm not so sure.
Well, I think it's the format where he's valued less, let's say, but because his ADP is like 135, 140. in roto leagues right now. And I don't love that price. I think he's fine here, but I think the price in roto leagues is probably too much.
After Xavier Edwards, there was Max Muncy, Alec Burleson. Scott selected Max Scherzer. We did get a comment in the chat. Edwards was never making it to you, Scott. So I kind of wish Devin didn't take Xavier Edwards, because then if B-Don did it one pick before you, it would have been even more dramatic.
A true snipe. Yeah, that's okay. Life goes on. I'm going to take a couple pitchers I really like. Well, really like's a little strong.
Yeah, I was about to say the pitchers left are.
I'm excited to get outside the top 200 in a head-to-head points league. One of them, Max Scherzer, I said he was going to get drafted. I didn't know it was going to be by me, but it'll either work or it won't. And if it doesn't, then I think at this point in the draft, no harm, no foul.
He looked okay today in his debut, for what it's worth.
Yeah, if it does work, then he might be must start for me for as long as he's healthy. And then a pitcher who I am known for, and I wouldn't touch him in a roto league at this point, but I think in a points league, he's still pretty darn valuable, and that's Mitch Keller. Probably going to have an ERA over 4, but going to work deep into games a lot. And the low points aren't going to hurt as much as they will in roto, but the high points are going to make a big impact for you.
You know, with Mitch Keller, if you just eliminate his 10 worst starts last time, I'm just kidding. We are into round 18. Let's take our final break. And when we return, we'll catch you up right after this.
Gives it to Jenkins for the championship. A 16 beats a 1. From sweet to elite to the Final Four.
Welcome back in. We are in round 18 of our head-to-head points mock draft. Scott kicked it off with Mitch Keller, followed by Christian Campbell, and then Cody Bradford. So Christian Campbell getting drafted here in this format, I would assume as a bench piece at this point. But, you know, drafting early, seeing what happens throughout spring, maybe he does earn a spot on their roster, and they play Bregman at third and Devers at DH or first base, whatever they might do. But yeah, we'll see how the rest of spring plays out. Scott, no interest in Cody Bradford. I know he's someone that
there was interest.
We like.
There was interest. It was close between him and Mitch Keller. If I didn't have a point to make about Mitch Keller, I might have taken Bradford instead. I'm not disappointed to see him go because my bench is full, so I can't take another starting pitcher. But yeah, he was in the discussion for me. It's not 100% he has a rotation spot. As bad as Kumar Rocker's first spring start looked, it's not over obviously the competition, but I think Rocker is he already has a hurdle to overcome to win a spot, and he didn't help his case.
Mm-hmm. All right, after Cody Bradford, there was Michael Tolia and Quinn Matthews. I selected Quinn Matthews, who made his spring debut here on Tuesday, and he looks pretty good. He was breakout pitching prospect last season for the Cardinals. It was only one start. He threw 2 innings. I think it was 3 strikeouts, 1 against Vladimir Guerrero Jr. But if he does get called up at some point, or I don't think he's going to make the opening day rotation. I guess crazier things have happened. But he was a workhorse last year in the minors. So once he gets called up, I kind of think the Cardinals are just going to let Quinn Matthews go and give them some innings. So
let him cook.
That is the hope.
Yeah, the problem is he's probably 7th in line at best, or 7th in the depth chart at best. So he probably needs a trade and an injury. I think he's not on the 40-man roster as well. So it's just, I love Quinn Matthews. I think he's super talented and one of the only rookie pitchers who could legitimately throw 175 innings this season. It's just, I wish I could see a clearer path to getting him on the opening day roster.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to happen on opening day either. But if he picks up where he left off in the minors, life finds a way, right? So May, June, potentially. Hopefully that is the case for Quinn Matthews. After him, we saw Chris Bassett go, then Zach Neto, Clark Schmidt, David Bednar, Luis Severino, and Chris, you are back up round 18.
I am on the clock. I'm going to take a guy that I haven't taken yet, but we'll see if he can. There's been very little hype around Tomoyuki Sugano from the Orioles. He was a very, very successful pitcher in his time in Japan. And we'll just, see. He's in the rotation. He's got a good team backing him up, a good defense, a good ballpark, or at least an average ballpark. So I'll throw that flyer out there.
And I think if his skills translate and the fact that he's a veteran, Chris, he's someone that you would expect to eat innings for the Orioles.
Yeah, I mean, I would be surprised if he won't make 33 starts, because they'll probably throw him every 5 days. But the one thing to keep in mind is I think his numbers overall were pretty similar to Shota Imanaga, and the like kind of approach is superficially similar, right? He's a shorter lefty who throws, actually he's a righty, I think, throws in the low 90s, but he's got like good shapes. It's just, he got a lot fewer strikeouts than Imanaga did in his final year in Japan. So expectations should certainly not be anywhere near that high, but a serviceable guy outside of the top 200. We'll see.
All right. At the turn, we saw Ryan McMahon and Merrill Kelly go. We'll see if Merrill Kelly can stay healthy and get back on track, closer to the pitcher he was in 2023. And then Chris, another Sparp, Mike Soroka.
I said I wanted to get 3, and that's my third one. If you're looking for a Reynaldo Lopez type, Mike Soroka found some success in the bullpen last year with the White Sox, switched to a 4-seamer slider approach. We'll see if it carries over. He got a ton of whiffs, ton of strikeouts in the second half of the season. It was like July 1st on, it was like a 41% strikeout rate, only 25 innings. No guarantee he carries it over, but the replacement level is very high in a league like this. We will find guys who are useful if he doesn't work out.
I was going to ask why Mike Soroka over Drew Rasmussen, but I see Rasmussen went 20 picks ago, and so that's fine. It looks like all the Sparps worth drafting are gone now, right? Hayden Wesneski, Luis Ortiz are still out there, but
yeah.
I wouldn't bother. Personally, I wouldn't bother with either of them in a 12-team league. I just don't think the upside's there.
I could see it with either one, but no, I agree. They're not especially. I mean, most of these guys are probably just dropped after the first couple of starts, right? Like, it's not an especially strong Sparp class. I wouldn't drop Jackson Jobe that quickly, but if I drop Mike Soroka after the first week or two of the season, I would not be surprised at all. It's just taking flyers to see what works out.
Probably the top 3? The top 3 being Bowden Francis, Jackson Jobe, and Clay Holmes. You're going to give them pretty much all of April to show they don't belong, right? But then the rest, you're going to have a pretty quick hook for them. If they stick, great. But if they're struggling out of the gate, you're probably not sticking with them for long.
I'd put Nick Martinez in that conversation as well, just because he has had some solid success as a starter already. But yeah, I mostly agree. Yeah. But just like to drive the point home, and we talked about this a lot in our head-to-head points discussion, and Scott's going to take a couple of these guys at least, because he's the only person who doesn't have at least one RP. There are 2 other people who don't have 2, but Jordan Romano's still out there. Trevor McGill, Tanner Scott, Pete Fairbanks, Carlos Estevez, Ryan Presley, Kenley Jansen, Alexis Diaz are all guys we think are closers and are all still available. Plus, I wouldn't be surprised if Scott makes one of his last 2 picks, AJ Puck, because I know he likes him a lot. So there are replaceable RPs out there if the Sparps don't work out.
After you took Mike Soroka, we saw Ryan Weathers, Bubba Chandler, Luis Rengifo, Michael Wacha, Edward Cabrera. I ended the skid. My starting first baseman is Paul Goldschmidt, which is...
Congratulations.
Here we are, the year 2025. I'm starting
Mr.
Paul
Yankee.
Goldschmidt.
Well, I mean, you're starting Paul Goldschmidt. You waited the whole draft to draft a first baseman, and it's still Paul Goldschmidt. That is a credit to a shallow league without a corner infield spot is
He could be fine.
You can survive punting any position, ideally you want high impact at every spot, but you're probably not going to get high impact at every spot. And Goldschmidt might be fine. And if he's not, somebody's going to emerge on the waiver wire because the league's so shallow. And so I'm taking the same approach at shortstop. I'm kind of assuaging myself by saying that. I'm taking Mason Wynn. There are some shortstops I rank higher still available. Anthony Volpe, Jeremy Pena, Ezekiel Tovar. Mason Wynn was as good as all of them on a per game basis. And I perceive him to have more growth potential than Volpe, Pena, and Tovar. If for no other reason, because he's set a goal of stealing 40 bases. And he didn't steal that many last year. So there's a lot of room for improvement there. I kind of considered him the ultimate fallback.
Makes a lot of contact.
Yeah, and he's expected to hit leadoff for the Cardinals. So that helps too. And I will take my first reliever, the best one on the board, Trevor McGill. Plenty happy with that.
After I took Paul Goldschmidt, there was Roman Anthony with the Red Sox, Tanner Scott, Brady Singer. Scott took Mason Wynn and Trevor McGill. And we are here into round 20, our, I believe, second to last round of this draft. Yes, that is correct. All right. Roman Anthony, I noticed, very small sample size so far, but he's been playing for the Red Sox. He's looked pretty good. We'll see if he can keep it up. I don't really see a way where he is on the Red Sox opening day roster unless like two other players get hurt or Yoshida's just not healthy enough to play.
Yeah.
But yeah, that would be a little bit tough for him. After Trevor McGill, there was Kumar Rocker and Shane Bieber. So two, I guess you could say stash candidates because Rocker, maybe he starts in the bullpen. Not sure he'll be in the rotation.
I think he'll begin in the minors, but a lot of spring to go, obviously.
Yep. Made his spring debut on Tuesday, gave up 4 runs over 1 inning of work. And then Shane Bieber, working his way back from Tommy John surgery, should be back June, July, maybe second half of the season.
Now he's a little easier to stash because you could do it in an IL spot.
Yep.
Unless you have a ton of IL spots, there will probably come a point where it's like before Shane Bieber comes back where it's like, I have too many injured players. Do I really hold on to Bieber? So I would say it's a long shot that Nathan Judas sticks with Bieber all that time because he's just going to need to use his space some other way. But it doesn't hurt to gamble on it at the start of the year that maybe you can hold on to him because he should be good when he returns.
All right. After Bieber, there was Kyle Harrison. I just realized I'm up, so I've got to figure out what I want to do. Let's slide on over to starting pitcher and see what is out here.
It's not a lot.
Yeah, there's not too much going on here. Do I want to go with the old reliable? Do I want to go with the upside guy? Let's go with the upside guy. David Festa, someone who I do like as a deep sleeper. Got a ton of whiffs last year, but did get hit hard at times and gave up a good amount of home runs. But he was a prospect of note in the Twins organization and fighting for a rotation spot this spring. So hoping that works out for David Festa. We do see another Sparp, Hayden Wesneski, go off the board. Think he will be in the Astros rotation as well. And then Jameson Taillon, Nestor Cortez, and Shea Langoliers. Nestor Cortez was the other player I was debating. Chris, who would you take, David Festa or Nestor Cortez?
I have Festa or Cortez ranked higher, but I think if you're thinking about it from an upside versus safety perspective and you wanted to prioritize upside, Festa probably has more. Although Cortez, if the strikeout rate creeps up just a little bit this year, he does so much else well. And it is probably a slightly better ballpark. So I can see Nestor Cortez working out.
I want to make a clarification here because Steve Giangaspero. Say the name, Frank.
There's got to be a better way to say that.
Steve Giangaspero, who I credited for the Ryan Walker pick in round 15, but heavily criticized for the Ryan Jeffers pick a few rounds earlier. We said, you could wait till the end of the draft to take him. Apparently, he accidentally clicked on Jeffers.
It was a misclick, yeah.
And he did let us know And we just ignored him because we're busy recording a podcast and not paying attention to the league chat. But yeah, just wanted to clear that up. He ended up taking Shea Langoliers just now, and I imagine he's going to drop Ryan Jeffers right away.
And he did hook us up with the phonetic spelling of his name. So Gene Gaspro.
There you go. Gene Gaspro. I can say that.
Good pick. Chris, you got your first baseman, and it's Nate Lowe. He does get on base a lot.
Yeah, I'm kind of talking myself into Nate Lowe as like a fallback option in an OBP or points league. I think it's weird that the Rangers basically swapped him out for Jake Berger because I think Nate Lowe's just a better player. But the Rangers apparently specifically struggled against fastballs last year, and that was the thought process behind making that replacement. So that was the thought process there. But yeah, he was a pretty consistent low to mid 400s guy before last season. So if he bounces back, he'll certainly play every day in Washington.
All right. After we got that Langoliers pick, there was Tyler Fitzgerald. Chris, you selected Nate Lowe, Ryan Presley, and Francisco Alvarez. We have made it to the final round of the draft here. And Chris, it's your last pick.
Yeah, and I'll take another first baseman just in case it doesn't work out with Nate Lowe. And it's Ryan Mountcastle, who's not great in this format. Even that 1 year he had 33 homers. It was only 395 points. So I imagine that's why he made it as far as he did. But, you know, with the Orioles moving the fences in left field, we do think Ryan Mountcastle has a chance to break out. The quality of contact metrics have been very good the past couple of years. So that's the thought process there.
All right. After Mountcastle, there was Pete Fairbanks and Pete Crow Armstrong.
Pete run.
Yeah, that's true. Speaking on Mountcastle, I was looking at Michael Busch for my first base, and he does get on base. I feel like he would work out pretty well in this format. It's just the fact that they signed Justin Turner, and I don't think he's going to play every day now. He's probably going to lose some at bats against lefties. If memory serves right, I don't think he was terrible against lefties last season, but the fact that Justin Turner is there, I think he's going to play a little bit. So takes some playing time away from Michael Busch, unfortunately.
Agreed.
Yep. After the Petes, we got Tyler Stevenson, Victor Robles, and I am on deck. You got to fill out the bench with pitchers, I think, in this format. You want to get as many pitchers as possible, some upside. I was going to take Justin Verlander, so nothing like being sniped in the final round of the draft.
As you're building up to the pick.
I was just filibustering to get my Justin Verlander, and now he's gone, so I will not be taking Justin Verlander. I will take, let's take Jose Soriano, who has a little bit of upside, I think, with the Angels. He gets a ton of ground balls. He throws very hard. He's got an awesome curveball. Hopefully, if he can limit the walks a little bit, goes a little bit deeper into his starts, that is Jose Soriano. And here we are. We've up to the final picks of the draft. Scott, you are in control of Mr. Irrelevant for this draft.
He'll be relevant for me, though, because he'll be in my starting lineup. I might just replace him on a whim because he's a closer, and that's what you can do with closers in this format.
That's exactly right. Well, let's check out the closer position, see who we got. Name drop everybody because it doesn't matter at this point. Kenley Jansen, Carlos Estevez, Alexis Diaz, Jordan Romano, Kyle Finnegan. I wanted to mention Kyle Finnegan back to the Nationals, where I assume he'll just be their closer again, right?
That's what I'm assuming. I would at least assume he's ahead of that Lawfarer Lopez group that was vying for it before.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, their closer the last 2 years, made the All-Star team last year. It's not a great closer, obviously, but
38 saves last season.
Neither would the alternatives be a great closer. At least Finnegan has shown he can do it. So I did move him up. I moved him ahead of Jason Foley, actually, because I have more confidence in how Dave Martinez is going to handle Finnegan than I do in how AJ Hinch is going to handle Foley.
All right, Scott. So who's the pick?
It's Jordan Romano. He's the best closer left. Maybe he's not okay after elbow surgery, but if he's not okay, I'll swap him out for maybe Kyle Finnegan or maybe somebody even better.
All right. That is the end of our mock draft. 12-team head-to-head points. Big thanks for everyone who came to watch us live. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Thanks to everyone who joined us in the draft as well. Let me back out of the draft room here. I'll pull up our team so we can do a little quick recap and see how things turned out. Was my team nearly as bad as I said it was? I don't know. I guess we're going to find out here. But we will start with Chris's team, who was drafting second overall. Took Ohtani. Just at the top, Chris, the way that everything played out, do you regret passing on Bobby Witt for Shohei Ohtani?
I don't think regret is the right word, right? If Shohei Ohtani has a 50-homer season again, it's going to be fine. It did present some complications, and in addition to everything that we talked about in the first podcast, there were definitely points where I passed on the best player because it was an outfielder, and I already had 2 outfielders, and there was just there was nothing I could do, right? Like I already had 2 outfielders. I didn't want to take a third because then I'm cutting myself off again. So yeah, it creates some complications when it's your first overall pick. And yeah, it was tough. I'm not totally in love with this team.
All right, well, let's take a look at the lineup first. The batters that you wound up with. You've got Yainer Diaz, a catcher, followed by Nate Lowe, Ketel Marte, Royce Lewis, Carlos Correa, Teoscar Hernandez, Wyatt Langford, Jurickson Profar, and Shohei Ohtani. What are your thoughts on the way that the lineup came together, the hitter portion of it?
It's not safe. So if you're the type of person who catastrophizes and worries about how things are going to go wrong, this is not the team for you, but there's plenty of upside here. We talk about having potential difference makers. Well, I think you don't really have to squint too hard to see a potential difference maker at every spot in the lineup, except for first base.
I agree.
It's just what happens when Carlos Correa's foot starts acting up, and what happens when Royce Lewis inevitably, gets an oblique injury 3 days into the season, and Wyatt Langford is currently hurt. Like, there are a lot of ways for this to go wrong. There are potentially few avenues for it to go right, but if it does go right, it could be really, really good.
I think you're being too hard on it. I think I like the upside you have at every spot, and if you're going to go risky,
this
shallower format like this is time to do it. So I would go to war with this lineup.
And the pitching staff, I assume you will also go to war with, because the pitching staff is great. You've got Corbin Burns, Dylan Cease, Yu Darvish, Zach Gallen, Jacob deGrom. So 3 top 20 options, and then Zach Gallen gives you another top 36, and then Yu Darvish, who you waited on to get your SP5. And then for relievers, you've got the Sparps, you've got Jackson Jobe, you've got Nick Martinez. You also have Mike Soroka on the bench, along with Walker Buehler, Nick Lodolo, and Tomoyuki Sugano. So tons of upside here at starting pitcher. I would guess this is one of, if not the best pitching staff in the league.
I mean, for as long as Jacob deGrom's upright, because I think between Burns, Cease, and deGrom, that's 3 top 12 pitchers for week 1. It's just how many weeks is that going to be available? And I think in retrospect, what I probably should have done was, instead of Walker Buehler and Nick Lodolo, who are upside guys, maybe found a couple of more high floor projectable guys that I can put in my rotation when Darvish misses time, or deGrom, or even Gallen missed time last year. So that,
new ones will emerge.
Yeah.
I don't know. Hot take. I like the hitters more than the pitchers. Obviously, there's no complaining about Corbin Burns and Dylan Cease at the top. And I am someone who's catastrophizing about Jacob deGrom, I'll admit. So that pick looks worse to me than maybe it would to the average person. But just in general, I don't love the depth after Burns and Cease.
Mm-hmm.
That just means it's an imperfect team. That doesn't mean you can't win with this team. I think you absolutely can.
Yeah, it might just be, there might be too many points of failure on the team, Yeah.
All right, let's take a look at whatever I put together here. Drafting 8th overall, the hitters that I have are Adley Rutschman, Paul Goldschmidt, Xander Bogaerts, Manny Machado, Francisco Lindor, Adolis Garcia, Ian Happ, Kyle Tucker, and Kyle Schwarber. So I used my first 5 picks on hitters, didn't take a starting pitcher until round 6. And, looking at it now, it doesn't look so bad. What do you guys think?
Yeah. As somebody who doesn't have a lot of confidence in Adolis Garcia, I see 2 pretty weak spots. First base with Goldschmidt, third outfield spot with Garcia. Bogart's a little underwhelming as your second baseman. So while Chris had 1 clear weak point in his lineup, I think you have 2.5.
Mm-hmm.
And I used my first 5 picks on hitters. So
but I will say, I think the key distinction is you probably don't have as much like high-end potential. Like I think Xander Bogaerts, the best case scenario is he's just pretty good. And Garcia only has the 1 year where he's averaged 3 fantasy points per game. So if we're talking about that difference making upside, I think that's what you're talking about. There are fewer ways this goes wrong though.
And I will point out your good hitters, Kyle Tucker, Francisco Lindor, Manny Machado, Adley Rutschman, all have the potential to be the best at their position.
Yes.
Yeah. I do just still wonder. I understand Adley Rutschman should be really good in this format. 5th round pick on him. But whenever I take a catcher early in a 1-catcher league, it just feels like the opportunity cost where maybe I could have grabbed the first baseman at that point and didn't have Paul Goldschmidt, or a second baseman to get, I think Semien was still available at that point or something like that.
Yeah, well, let's take a look.
I mean, Rutschman feels like a safer stud to me than Semien does. So,
yes. So you passed on, there weren't really any first basemen drafted. Christian Walker went a couple of rounds later.
Yeah,
would you feel better if it was Christian Walker and Francisco Alvarez instead of Adley Rutschman and Paul Goldschmidt?
Not really.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think it's pretty similar. So it also, how much of a chance do you give Paul Goldschmidt to bounce back? It is a better park, a better lineup. Plate discipline should still be decent, although the strikeout rate was concerning, especially in the first half. So yeah, I think it's fine.
Yep. Let's move on to the pitchers again. I didn't take one until round 6, but then I loaded up from there. I've got Hunter Brown, Sonny Gray, Shota Imanaga, Bailey Ober, and Carlos Rodon. Typically, I want at least 4 of my top 40. Here, I got 5 of my top 40. And, that doesn't include any of my top 15, but I really lived in that quote-unquote good glob. I've got 5 between 18 and 40 in my starting pitcher rankings. So, and then I've got Ryan Helsley and Grant Holmes as my relievers.
Yeah, I think it's fine. I don't think it's the best pitching staff I've ever seen, but I think it's fine.
It feels more like a higher floor team than anything. I don't know that this team is, shooting for upside and has first place potential, but you sneak into the playoffs and then you see what happens from there.
You should have a good chance to make the playoffs. That looking at our 2 teams so far, it's easier to see me finishing 2nd or 10th, and it's easier to see you making the playoffs.
Let's wrap up with Scott's team, who was drafting 12th overall in this one. You've got William Contreras, Vladimir Guerrero Jr., Nico Horner, Jazz Chisholm, Mason Wynn, Lawrence Butler, Corbin Carroll, Christian Yelich, Matt Chapman in your utility spot with Randy Arozarena on the bench. So you do have some flexibility here, Scott. Once Jazz gets second base, you can move him. You can put Chapman up to 3rd. You can put Randy in your utility spot. And you might be waiting for Horner to get healthy too. So
one of Nico Horner, Matt Chapman, and Randy Arozarena will be in my lineup, and the other 2 won't be. And I feel good about it. Obviously, shortstop is weak. That's my weak spot, which I took with my 3rd to last pick. I didn't want to go quite that weak, but I just kept pushing the limit, missed out on Dansby Swanson, missed out on Xavier Edwards. Could go fine with Wynn. If he increases his steals this year, leadoff guy, he could have a breakout season, and I'm not searching for a shortstop. Ideally, I'm not searching for anything coming out of a shallow league draft like this, but I don't mind searching. If I have one clear weak spot, knowing that the waiver wire is going to be fertile, knowing that we're not going to there are going to be players emerging who we didn't see coming. And I remember last year, I think it was in the podcast league, I had the draft played out so that I didn't get a good second baseman. I basically punted on second baseman the way I punted on shortstop in this draft. By week 2, Jordan Westberg was my starting second baseman, and it just wasn't a problem all year, So,
And like,
if you can really fixate on, okay, I know I need help at this position, so if I see somebody looking like they're breaking out, I'm just going to go for it. Then I think that punted position, quote unquote, in the draft ends up not being such a big deal.
and I think that's kind of an underrated thing. I think people like fixate too much on like, I can't have any weaknesses. And this is true in fantasy football. It's true in fantasy baseball. But I think people look at it and like, too many people think I can't take a bench player until my lineup is filled. And that is the wrong way to view it, because one, you can't know for sure what your weaknesses are going to be, because Mason Wynn could just hit 285 with 15 homers and steal 30 bases this year, and then it's not a weakness at all. But two, you're going to have a weakness somewhere, probably multiple weaknesses. And like Scott said, there is something clarifying about going into the season knowing every shortstop who shows something, you might have to take a flyer on them just to see. And it can save you some headaches, and it can save you wasting fab knowing, hey, this is what I need. And looking at the waiver wire, like Ezekiel Tovar's out there. If you have to start him, it's not the worst thing in the world. Jeremy Pena, kind of the same thing. We did see a season not very long ago, 2 years ago, where JP Crawford was basically a must-start option at the position. And if Anthony Volpe's gains with plate discipline from last year stick and he's hitting leadoff, the case could be what you made for Wynn, but with Volpe. So there are options. Jacob Wilson could be useful in this format. So there are options at shortstop.
Let's take a look at the pitchers. And Scott, you have Tanner Bybee, Jared Jones, Michael King, Seth Lugo, Aaron Nola, and then your relievers, Trevor McGill, Jordan Romano. On the bench, Mitch Keller, Sean Manaea, Robbie Ray, and Max Scherzer. So I think this is pretty typical. You waited at least until the 5th round to take your first starting pitcher, and then there is some upside there on the bench as well.
Yeah, I love the upside on the bench. I love that I have 9 starting pitchers and that the 5 are strong pitchers that I expect to keep on my roster all season long. I really like this pitching staff. It is probably going to be among the best pitching staffs I draft this year, which makes sense because I went with the starting pitcher in round 5 and 6 earlier than usual, because that's when it appeared that all the stud hitters were gone. I like this team. I like this team a lot. Maybe you guys feel differently. I know you were complaining about your teams, and then I saw your teams and thought, those teams are pretty good too. But I like this team a lot. I find that when I draft 12th in a 12-team league this year, I tend to like the results. I think it's because in round 2, you're still basically getting a first-round pick. And then in round 3, 4, the players available are just as good as in at 2-3.
Yeah, I think in a 12-team league, it's different in a 15-team, but I think in a 12-team league, 9 through 12 is more of an ideal spot. Obviously, look, if Aaron Judge or Shohei Ohtani repeat what they did last year, then picking in the top 2 is going to be hugely advantageous, because 700 points is just such a massive number. But assuming there's some regression there, and obviously I think there's a little bit of risk there, I do think the pairs you can put together at the end of the first round are really, really strong this year.
I do just want to quickly take a look at B-Don's team, because I mentioned he started with
pocket aces.
So I wanted to see how the lineup came together, the batters at least. And he's got Gabriel Moreno at catcher, Pete Alonso at first, Luis Arraez, Junior Caminero, CJ Abrams, O'Neal Cruz, Jason Dominguez, James Wood, and Taylor Ward. So I think this is just the way that B-Don drafts. It feels like it would be better in like a roto or category.
Yeah, this is more of a roto lineup. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, look, there's upside for sure. It's a lot of young guys that still have potential, but maybe not hitters that necessarily excel in this format.
Yeah. I mean, the one thing I will say is like the outfield, there's a lot of swing and miss there with Wood, Dominguez, and Cruz. They're also all very patient hitters. So in theory, you can see a world where all 5 of them become 500 plus point guys. Abrams less so because he's a free swinger, but Caminero has big upside. So,
In
when we're
theory.
talking about like my lineup having the one spot where there's no upside or not as much upside, this one is probably catcher, second, short, and utility don't really have the upside.
In theory, I mean, a lot has to go right. This team, he has some really clear weak spots in Gabriel Moreno, Luis Ariz, and Taylor Ward. And then his strong spots, he doesn't have a single hitter who averaged 3 points per game last year. And so
Tough.
Look, I don't want to rag on B-Don. He won our head-to-head points auction league last year, so he clearly knows what he's doing. But I wonder if, given the way his lineup turned out, he would have preferred to go hitter at the start there.
On the other hand, those weeks where Paul Skeens and Tarek Skubal line up for 2 starts, you're done.
He's got Devin Williams and Clay Holmes.
That's 80 points right there.
Yeah. And the rest of the rotation, Roki Sasaki, Luis Heel, Strider. So shooting for upside, lots of upside here. But I guess if you play in a shallower format, you could take some more chances on upside. I don't know that you want maybe the majority of your team to be upside, but you can take more chances.
You just need more you need hitters that you can bank on, and he doesn't have a single one.
Yeah, not trying to be overly critical, but just wanted to come back to this team to see how the pocket aces worked out there. All right, well, that is going to do it for our first live mock draft of the offseason. We're going to wrap there. For Scott and Chris, I am Frank. Thanks as always for tuning in to Fantasy Baseball Today. Please make sure to follow and leave a 5-star rating on Apple or Spotify, and we will be back again tomorrow. Bye-bye.